Good evening, everyone. On behalf of IBPC Dubai, we express our deepest condolences, and I would request all of you to join us for the silent prayers for the departed soul. We'll observe a minute of silent prayer. I'll hand over the session now to Secretary General of IBPC, Mr. Dilip Sinha. Over to you, sir.
Good evening and salam alaikum and namaste everyone. Today indeed is a sad day with an unfortunate passing away of Sheikh Hamdan bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Finance Minister of UAE. On behalf of IBPC, once again, I offer our deepest condolences to the royal family, to all the Emirati brothers and sisters, and to all the residents of UAE. Today, we are doing a very important event on DNFBP compliance, something which has been a rule which has come recently. And this important webinar is being conducted to keep you abreast with the policy guidelines, and that will be talked over by two eminent experts, Mr. Abhishek Jaju, Chief Executive Officer of AJMS Global UAE, and Mr. Satish Menon, Chief Executive Officer of REMIX Technologies UAE. This webinar throughout will be conducted and moderated by Mr. Naveen Sharma, who is the convener of AAA focus group of IBPC. So without much ado, I pass it on to Mr. Sharma to take this evening webinar forward. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, Dilip sir, and good evening. As we know, today we lost a great leader, Sheikh Hamdan bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Deputy Ruler of Dubai and UAE Minister of Finance. And on behalf of IBPC, we feel that a great leader, the country has lost a great leader. The seminar which we are hosting today is a very unique seminar. The anti-money laundering is becoming a new normal. Everywhere, all over the world, international taxation and the dirty money has no place now. So there is a regulation. In the regulation, there is certain categories need to register first, and then after the registration, there are some obligation on certain people that how they are going to report, and there is a deadline. And deadline is 31st of March, and it's not away. Our speakers, both the speakers, Mr. Abhishek Jaju and Mr. Satish Menon, is going after one webinar to the another webinar. They have addressed thousands of people over the Zoom, consulted a number of companies, individuals in the past 2 or 3 weeks, which has multinational companies as well as the corporation. Although we have circulated the profile, but for the benefit of the members and guests who are attending the seminar now, I would like to introduce briefly. Mr. Abhishek Jaju is a serial entrepreneur who comes with the experience in RegTech, risk management and compliance. He has been passionate about fintech and have been advising various fintech firms across the world. He is currently the founding partner and CEO of AJMS Global, a niche consulting firm focusing in the area of risk, tax and compliance. Under his leadership, AJMS has grown leaps and bounds and is now presently serving in more than 5 countries, with head office being in the UAE. He is also the co-founder and partner of TrueAct, a compliance solution of IFRS 16 for insurance sector. Prior to this, he has worked with various leading banks, investment companies, financial institutions, etc. Give a big round of applause to our speaker, Mr. Abhishek Jaju. And I will also introduce in advance our second speaker, Mr. Satish B. Menon. Satish is an outstanding professional with 30 years experience in all aspects of insurance, banking, remittance, and MSB services. He has wide experience of working in the international market. He also has experience in internal audit and compliance management framework, beside in-depth exposure to risk management, fraud investigation, fraud prevention, internal audits, establishment of corporate systems and governance. He was working, he was heading the banking and governance department of one of the leading exchange company in the UAE for almost 8 years. He has been overseeing the compliance and regulatory requirements of their overseas entities in 5 other jurisdictions. Thus, he brings an international flavor with the knowledge gained from other jurisdictions. Give a big round of applause to Mr. Satish Menon. I now request Mr. Abhishek Jaju to take the meeting forward.
Thank you, Mr. Naveen, and thank you, Mr. Dilip, for hosting us today. Obviously, it is very important for all of us to convey our condolences on the sad demise of the Deputy Ruler of Dubai. So, we would also like to pass from our AGMS side condolences to our Emirati brothers and sisters. And again, coming back to the topic, this is something which has become one of the most important topics. So I'll just share my screen so that everybody is able to see. So anti-money laundering is something which we have been hearing for the last many years. But why this has gained importance is because now, apart from the banking and the financial institution, you see a lot of designated non-financial business and profession who has to comply with the law of the land, as well as the law regulations that has come to ensure they do their part in terms of reporting any suspicious transaction, as well as anything pertaining to terrorist financing. Now, recently, Ministry of Economy had come out in the month of Feb with Circular 1 to 4, focusing on the guidelines which has to be followed by all the sectors which fall under DNFBP. So as part of the session, we will take you through what are those guidelines, how you need to work on that, how to ensure the compliance with those specific rules, and obviously going forward, what are the key steps, as the members of the community you have to take, and also to protect the business which you are in. So without further ado, I'll quickly just elaborate the agenda for today's discussion. I will be taking the national risk assessment part, giving you an overview about what exactly just the basics of the money laundering is, focusing more on the initiatives taken by the UAE government with regards to anti-money laundering and terrorist financing laws, as well as further circulars in cabinet resolutions, and why the GoAML registration before 31st March, be it for gold and jewelry sector, be it from real estate sector, be it from accountant and auditors or corporate service provider, has become so important, and non-compliance also potentially leads to certain penalties. Now, my colleague Satish will be taking care of the other part, which is focusing on the AML CFT obligation for DNFBPs. With his experience, he has already, registered a lot of organization in GoAML and implementation of the GoAML solutions itself. So, and plus with more real life examples, where case studies is what we plan to cover before we go into the question and answer round. So, as an introduction, it is very important that we elaborate. So as money laundering defined under the law number 20, it focuses on how you convert the dirty money into a clean money. Now that entire process is what has to be monitored, and reporting has to be done if there is any suspicious transaction which is identified. So people use multiple banking channels, multiple cash transactions, trade-based money laundering to identify, place the money in the system, to layer it, hide the source of the income, as well as integrate it into the financial system. So this as a overall process has been hurting not only economies in this part of the world, but globally also, because it leads to promotion of sources of illicit money, which are generally earned through illegal activities in certain countries, and because of that, corruption, fraud, as well as crime rate also increases. So money laundering and terrorist financing has very negative impact not only on the economy but on the business in the country where we reside. So this is probably a time where the government has taken much more initiatives, and we will go into why these initiatives have become so important in the recent past. As we outlined, the risks which are posed are not only at the level of financial risk, but also involves reputational risk at a country level, because the countries doesn't want to fall under the grey list globally, so that all the financial institutions which are dealing with the local financial institution in UAE continue to deal with them unless they don't strengthen the AML laws and regulations in the country. So if there is a weak control, and we always hear that there are grey list of FATF, which is Financial Action Task Force list, that globally the correspondent banking becomes very difficult, and because of that, it will be a challenge for the economies to grow also. Legal risk, obviously, there is a law which is there in the country. So if we don't abide by it, there is a legal risk which also comes apart from the operational risk, which is due to the sanctions and due to other restrictions. Because of that, your operations may come into the. Now, it is important to highlight that the authorities here have outlined and have taken a very strong and substantial action, which takes care of the future of the country and also protects the business, also ensures international funding also comes much more effective and much more transparently, which also enhances the overall governance framework within the country. Now, as part of their AML CFT National Strategy Framework, UAE had already enhanced the federal legislative and regulatory framework in this country. Now, this is something which also incorporates the FATF standards, because there are, and just for the audience, FATF refers, I'm sure a lot of people would be aware, this is a global body, and we will discuss about what FATF does and other things so that everybody is aware about the importance of this. But this is a global body which prepares and develops the regulations with regards to anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. Now, post that, once the framework has been set up, there was a national risk assessment which was performed, and I highly encourage all the members to review the report, which identifies what are the vulnerabilities which are there in each of the sector, be it on the financial sector or on the DNFBP sector, which focuses on the other ancillary sector where AML risk can be high. Now, based on the deficiencies, the country formulated the plan, and these are all part of the plan which has been formulated in line with the international regulation of FATF. I think a lot of you would be aware that the country was evaluated in 2009 by FATF, which is Financial Action Task Force, and they found as part of their report, which is also available in the FATF website, that major deficiencies were found out not only in financial sector, but also in the designated non-financial business and profession, especially on the real estate and DPMS, which is dealers in precious metals and stones. So one of the major things which was identified as a deficiency was the platform through which the absence of STR reporting was there. Now, what is STR is, suppose we are dealing with a customer and we feel that the customer is acting or there is suspicious about the transaction or anything pertaining to the transaction, whether the money, where it comes from, if there is any suspicion. Earlier, there was no platform, but going forward, it has been announced, especially on circular number 5 on 3rd of March, that before 31st March, all the DNFBPs have to register in GoML platform provided by Financial Intelligence Unit and Central Bank of UAE. Now, this is something which has become why the topic has become and taken so prominence, because non-compliance leads to penalties, which is already guided by the ministry guidelines, as well as also, if we non-comply with that, it also hurts the economy in a way that necessary reporting that needs to be done is not being done. So that's why, the absence of STR reporting was the first point which was tackled through the GoML platform. And today, my colleague will also be elaborating more on how to do the registration, especially a lot of members may be from certain sectors which are either real estate brokerage or, dealing in golds and precious metal stones and all. Another thing, if you see, circular number 58 was also launched in UAE, which focuses on the concealment of the UBO and declaration of the UBO, so that you don't conceal the UBO. So there were complex structures in the organization which had, global presence and complex structure in terms of the shareholding, the UBO was something which was one of the major deficiencies identified, and the circular with regards to that was also there. And I'm sure a lot of people are aware, if they are working with DD, or if they have other free zone licenses, there are deadlines to meet to declare the UBO to the supervisory body who are dealing with that. Now, in terms of implementing authority, without a doubt, central bank has taken a lead, and obviously a lot of financial institutions are already on the platform and have been registered. Financial Intelligence Department is now converted into Financial Intelligence Unit, and which has the sole national center for receiving, analyzing, and disseminating any suspicious transaction report. So the GoML platform, where the reporting would be done, will be reviewed completely by the Financial Intelligence Unit. Now, as I was mentioning about international regulation, why this is there, just again going back to earlier point, FATF did the review for the country in 2019 and identified certain gaps in DNFBP. Now, what is FATF is, they are an intergovernmental body. It comprises, again, of 36 members, but is being applied across 180 countries. Now, they have their 40 recommendations as well as specific 9 principles which has to be adopted. A lot of regulators have adopted that. A lot of regulators are in the process or are developing to make sure that the financial system is intact in terms of that. Before I go into the laws, this is something which is very important, that as an organization structure for the framework of AML, the country has taken very strong steps, not only setting up the Financial Intelligence Unit, it has also set up a higher committee for supervising the national strategy of AML, as we were discussing about the AML strategy, which actually Executive Office of the Higher Committee is there, and there are multiple subcommittees which are also part of the National Anti-Money Laundering, Combating and Financing Illegal Organization Committee. NAMLCFTC is one of the committees which is leading, and within that there are multiple committees, Money Laundering Initiative and other committees, which are formulating the strategy on how to implement, control, and mitigate the AML and the terrorist financing risk which the country faces. So as an organization, the strategy is already laid down. Now, once the strategy is laid down, it is time for execution, and there has been a lot of execution in terms of the laws, cabinet resolutions, guidelines, administrative notices which has come out. We have summarized what are the applicable laws and other details which are not only applicable for financial industry but also for DNFBPs. If you see here, the National Federal Law number 7 of 2014, but the main important law which has come now, which supersedes all the earlier AML laws, is Decree Federal number 20 of 2018. Now, in this 20 of 2018 has an implementation procedure, which is nothing but the cabinet decision number 10 of 2019. And within this, the definition of designated non-financial business and profession has been identified. Again, for that, they have also provided guidelines for each of the sectors which we discussed, and the administrative notices along with that. Circular number 58 talks about the UBO declaration, which is ultimate beneficiary owner declaration. So this is something which is also very critical, and a lot of supervisory body in UAE have become active and is collecting the data which is required. Last but not the least, Cabinet Decision 74 talks about UN sanction list, which is something all the DNFB have to subscribe, so that they don't deal with a customer who is potentially in that list, and which poses a huge money laundering and a high risk for terrorist financing. So this list has been provided by the government. It can be visited. There is a website, uaica.gov.in, and you very well can go and subscribe for the data and make sure that whenever you deal with the customer, there is a screening which is done. In addition to that, there is also some additional requirement which has been prescribed to check the politically exposed person in the country, because they are in the position of power and they may misuse the power to launder money, and that is how globally they are considered high risk. So this is something also has to be screened. It doesn't mean you can't deal with them. It's just that you have to make sure for PEPs, you have to do enhanced due diligence. For sanctions, you are not allowed to deal with them for any sanctioned individual or company. Now, as we were discussing about the national risk assessment was done, and even PATF also did their mutual evaluation of UAE. So based on that, all these steps have come in the recent past, which are taking the country forward in terms of the guidelines, in terms of the control and the framework, and also sending a message globally in terms of the way the business is being done here. Now, going into details about Federal Degree Law number 20, rather than going into the basics, what I would focus majorly is on the confidentiality of the STR, which is nothing but the suspicious transaction report. Now, I, as a DNFB, would be worried that if I report about the customer may not come, whether the customer will come to know, whether this information would be leaked. So for that, the GoAML platform assures and the FIU assures that there is no information that will go outside, and it will remain between you and FIU, so that confidentiality and protection is also given to you and the business which you are in. One of the things which is very important, they have defined as the roles and the responsibility of financial institution, which has been following a lot of AML law, but also DNFBPs, which is now the requirement to register before 31st March. Now, going into the definition, just to reiterate the point, the DNFBPs includes the auditors and accountants. There is, legal profession which is there, but that is tackled by Ministry of Justice right now. Auditors, accountant, and company trust providers, real estate agents and brokers, and dealers in precious stones and metals are somebody which are covered as part of Ministry of Economy circulars, so which is already mapped. So what we have done is we have just mapped the circulars for all the sectors. So brokers, if you see here, circular number 1, which came in 4th of Feb 2021, where what are the key ingredients of this circular will be discussed. Similarly, for dealers in precious metals and stones, lawyers and legal profession, as well as corporate service providers. Now, the cabinet decision number 10, which is the implementation procedure for law number 20, focuses on the steps that you need to take to ensure full compliance. Now, as an entity, whenever you deal with a customer, you are expected to do risk assessment, identify what are the kind of risk you are facing if the customer gets onboarded, and you deal with them. It can be country risk, it can be geographical risk, it can be the partners who you are dealing maybe on the sanction of the PEP list. Depending on that, you should develop an internal risk assessment model which ensures that you deal only with customers allowed as per the law of the land, and you don't deal with anybody, especially with the sanctioned entities. And even if you deal with somebody with high risk category, you are allowed to deal. Nobody stops. The law doesn't stop, but there are certain extra guidelines which has been given to comply with. So that has to be followed in totality. Coming to the second part on the KYC side, KYC has become very important, and all the DNFBPs anyways collects some form of the data. If you go to a gold jewelry shop, they will collect your identification document. They will collect, the card or the check through which you make the payment. So there are already basic information that is being captured. There are some enhancements which has to be done, how to identify suspicious transaction. The front staff has to be educated about it. There are extra things which you have to do, especially on the screening of the customer, especially on whether the customer declares themselves as PEP or not. So there are additional information as an individual customer who you deal would be required, but some of them are already in place. Some of them has been enhanced. KYC for the customer, especially for a corporate customer, is very complex, and the DNFBP has a huge problem in that area because they have to deal with legal entities and identify the UBOs who they are dealing, so that they can screen the shareholders or the ultimate beneficiary owners of the legal customers which you deal. STR, again, suspicious transaction report. So if you feel there is a transaction which is suspicious, please report. Nobody stops you, but obviously report along with the reasons and other things. My colleague will be explaining how to report that also, the total and the screenshot. So it will help you elaborate further. Record keeping, again, keep the records for the next 5 years for all the transaction which is there to ensure full KYC and process is maintained. Screening has become very important. Screening of your customers against the PEP and the sanction database is something which is very critical. One of the key things which the ministry has also focused on is also appointment of a compliance officer. It can be somebody who is nominated. If you are from a smaller organization, they have given the provision that the managing director or the senior management of that team can also register as a compliance officer. But one thing caveat they have mentioned that don't register somebody in the sales job as a compliance officer because of the conflicting nature. You are allowed to rely on the third party. There is no issue at all in terms of taking services with third party, but make sure that you follow especially the article number 17 and article number 19, which talks focuses on the under the cabinet decision number 10, focuses on what are the areas you can rely and you can provide the third party. Last but not the least, obviously, as and when the business is your business has become taken prominence, you have to have internal supervision and policy, especially an AML policy, to ensure that you are complying with the local laws and the provisions against that. I just want to touch base a couple of more slides on the UBO before I hand it over to my colleague. So this is something which has become very prominent also, and there are deadlines for updating this information. Obviously, the guidelines provided specifies the identification of the UPO, anybody above 25% direct or indirect, or somebody who owns more than 25% voting shares are considered as part of the UBO process, which has to be declared. There are entities which are exempted. Listed company, as you know, would be exempted because of the the transparency which they have in terms of the regulated market. So they already declare the information which is there. Secondly, with regards to the federal and any directly or indirectly wholly owned by federal or emirate government would also be exempted. Sometimes what happens is we may find that the ownership structure is less than 25%, or for some reason we are not able to identify the the UBOs who own more than 25%. So in that case, you are allowed to consider somebody who's a senior most of the company to consider them as UBO. So those are the things which are very important. The information with regards to the UBO that is being collected is very standard, but there are two things which are very important: the start date of becoming the UBO and the end date, because this is something very critical for the register to be updated correctly. And other information, KYC related information and ID information would be required to make sure that you are updated all the time. With regards to cabinet decision number 74, as we were mentioning that the UAE government has come out with the information, and they are publishing the UN sanction list and also internal list where the business should not be done. So as part of that, there are steps they have told to follow to ensure that you subscribe to the data as a DNFBP to ensure full compliance with the local requirements. This is something which is again one of the 4 steps which the ministry has also focused on top of the guidelines which have been provided with regards to implementation of cabinet resolution number 10. So the step entails, and I will like to summarize it in a very effective manner, that you will be allowed to register for the customer for your the UN sanction list, and any updates, addition or deletion will be notified to you on a timely basis. You should have your internal system to screen against these lists to make sure that you are not dealing with somebody who is part of this UN sanction list. So that is something where the focus has been. Going forward, another step is that once you register all on the side, the notices regarding addition and deletion of the name will be coming. You should continue performing ongoing due diligence of your existing customer also, not only at the time of onboarding a new customer, but also existing. There are certain guidelines which they have mentioned that if you have any funds without prior notice, freezing of the funds is required, but obviously this will be followed based on the supervisory guidelines which is there. If there is anything, which is the most important step which any DNFB has to follow, is step number 11, never tip off your customer about the match in the sanction database, because this will tantamount to tipping off, and the customer may become aware that his name has come, and he may take actions to probably flee the country, probably do something which is not in line with requirements of the law. So that is something which is very important, and that is where the training for all your front-end staff also is there, that if sometimes they find out something which is not, which is suspicious, tell them not to tip off the customer and make sure that make sure that the information which we are collecting and provided is remaining confidential and only reported to the regulators. With cabinet decision number 74, I would like the mic to be, handed over to my colleague, Mr. Menon, and from there he will take it forward, the presentation.
Presentation as usual, and you are everywhere in Dubai nowadays. AML, everybody wants to know, and the Q&A we will have after the session of Mr. Satish P. Menon. We have already introduced him. He's very experienced, and he has the experience of running an exchange company, which is a lot of funds are coming and going. And I know that our audience has a lot of practical questions from him, but without taking much time, I now request Mr. Satish P. Menon to address all of us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Naveen. Let me first of all share my screen. Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Abhishek. And as he was explaining to us, there is a lot of regulations, there are a lot of requirements which are required from all of us, include the DNFBPs, the financial institutions. What are the minimum statutory obligations that we are required to do? We need to identify, assess, understand the risks. So it is not only that you are going and doing the business, but you also need to understand, identify, assess, and understand the risks. Define and take due diligence measures. Due diligence would mean to understand your counterparty. Understand would mean from what is he doing, what is his intentions. We'll go into specifics subsequent to this. We need to appoint an AML CFT compliance officer. So he becomes the designated person to take decisions for the company, take a note of what is happening, and take responsibility and accountability for all that is happening under the umbrella of money laundering CFT guidelines. As a company, we need to introduce adequate management and information systems, internal controls. So the policy procedures will need to be built up in such a manner that you encompass all the detail, all the required guidelines which have been put in place. So there may be 5 circulars, 7 circulars, which Abhishek had just mentioned. Each of them caters to different aspects of AML and the CFT guidelines. We need to incorporate those. So these kind of additions need to be done on a routine manner. It need to be reviewed. It need to be updated. So those kind of policy procedures has to be in place. And there is something known as we call them the 3 layers of defense. So first line of defense is the front office. The first line of defense is the teller or the person who is meeting the customer. He is your person who can understand if the counterparty or the customer or the client who's standing in front of him has something to hide by way of his mannerisms, by way of his interactions. Maybe he is able to get something which is not normal. So that is your first line of defense. The second line of defense is what you're talking about, the compliance officer. He takes into consideration the inputs from the first line of defense and understands whether that is perfectly correct or there are certain things which he has omitted. So he builds on the information received from the first line of defense and takes a decision whether, yes, this is something which I have to report to the regulator, or he says, no, there's nothing wrong in this. There was some information lacking in the entire process. Therefore, he agrees to continue with the normal relationship. The third line of defense is your internal control, the internal audits which happen, who not only audits the processes, he also audits the compliance function. He has to understand, he has to investigate, he has to examine them, he has to understand whether the policies are the procedures that have been laid out for the compliance officer are being followed, or else there is a leakage. So therefore, even if the frontline has identified and your compliance officer is not doing his job, who is going to monitor that? So for that, the internal audit is also necessary. We need to have indicators to identify the suspicious transaction. Now, suspicious transaction for each industry would be separate, and every transaction, every industry has its own nuances. A financial industry may have its way of working, real estate may have its own style of working. So we need to specify it based on the industry in which we are working. Then we need to, once you have the identified the indicators, we also need to report. How we are going to report, that has to be stipulated, and we need to cooperate with the competent authority. In this case, the competent authority being the FIU. The Financial Intelligence Unit is the authority to whom every one of us, whether it is a financial institution or the DNFBPs, any one of them have to report to FIU. There are Security Council decisions, as Mr. Abhishek was mentioning, which put in place certain sanctions, not only against individuals or even against certain companies, for their role which they have played, maybe in anything which was not permitted in the law, or maybe one of the countries had complained. So the UN Security Council is empowered to take action against an individual or even against companies, and we are not permitted to deal with them. So that is why they are known as sanctioned entities. So in the country level, perhaps all of you are aware of Iran, North Korea. So these are sanctioned countries. Then there are sanctioned companies, whom maybe anywhere in the world, unless you understand who they are, you will be perhaps transacting business with a sanctioned entity, in which may jeopardize your own existence. And whatever we are doing, all these things, the policies, the audits, the decision making, the reports, everything needs to be recorded. And that record maintenance has also been stipulated in the law. It needs to be maintained for 5 years, minimum 5 years, I would say. So here, this is the starting point, I would say, for how you start the relationship. You start a relationship by understanding your customer. You know your customer. You have to understand. You need to. So there are 5 major steps that we should be aware of. First is inquiry. So inquire about him. You have an interaction with him. You need to collect documents. You have understood, okay, his name is XYZ. So you ask for some documents. There could be a verification. Supposing the level of your relationship is increasing on a day-to-day basis, your risk appetite may be breached, maybe your level of comfort is being breached, you go into further verifications. And then there is the record keeping. Once it has been achieved, then once you're comfortable with all these things, you go into the monitoring phase where the subsequent transactions keep happening. Now, in the KYC inquiry, or the initial, what we call it the CID. So there are 3 terms which I would like to specifically mention. What is the CID, which is the customer identification? Next would be the CDD, which would be the customer due diligence. And third would be the ECDD, or the enhanced customer due diligence. Now, what are we saying of customer identification? CID, it's just the process of obtaining an identification document and basic information. Who is a natural person in the point of sale? Now, look at a jewelry shop. You walk into the shop, he invariably asks you for your Emirates ID. Whether it is a 2,000 dirham purchase or a 200,000 purchase, he will always ask for your Emirates ID. Why does he do that? He does that to identify you. Perhaps he may, for a smaller value, he may have taken a copy of your credit card that also contains your name. So anything to identify the person who is there. So what is the verification phase that we were talking about? When we talk about the verification phase, we are talking about inquiring into the basic details, like what is the establishment, what is his business, or what are the ownerships in respect of a corporate. In respect of an individual, it may be basically where is he working. But for a corporate, we need additional information. So now when he has given you an ID, whether the ID is original, now most of the financial institutions are these days connected online to the Emirates ID Authority. So the verification or the authentication of the document that you're providing to them is immediate. So that is where the acceptability of the ID comes in. Now, there may be an occasion where the photograph of the ID is not on the ID is matching with the person. That has to be assessed. There may be minor differences. So here, with the technological advances, we have there are many applications. There are many tools which are introduced in the market to allow you to do a KYC with photo identification, photo ID verification, or matching the ID with the matching the face parameter biometrics with the photograph that is given. Then you also do the name and other personal details are matching with those appearing. That is one phase that you do. And if he is giving his passport as ID, then the visa details are also need to be captured to understand if he is a resident or a non-resident, because that changes the risk perspective that you have on the customer. A resident with a valid visa and the Emirates ID coming to you for purchase or doing transactions with you has a lower level of risk as compared to a person who is a non-resident, has come on a visit visa and has transacted business of the same value. So that risk perspective changes. So that is why when he asks for the additional documents or even the existing Emirates ID, that is the comfort that we get. So coming to the due diligence, customer due diligence, what are the essential points? So this is something in addition to what you're doing in customer identification. Here we have an additional layer of verifying their relationships vis-a-vis sanction lists. The sanction list is not, as Mr. Abhishek was telling you, you have to subscribe to that, or you take a tool which provides you the details and you do a mapping with the list. So there may be 15,000, 100,000 names in the sanctions, because the sanctions, one is the UN sanction, then there are individual sanctions from US, OFAC list, from UK, which is the HMRC list, then there's the EU list. So major economies and the major financial centers, you come out with their own lists. So if you're dealing in Euro and you are not checking the names against the EU list, you may be violating their rules, and they may ultimately your funds may get involved into and may get frozen. So therefore, it is always necessary that you screen against all the major lists. That is what the verifying part is. Then we need to do background test on the to identify any adverse information. So this is where the adverse media. So there are you may not have access to them directly, but you need to get into the license, get it licensed, get the subscription done, and adverse media is then populated. Otherwise, you will have to do a manual check, giving various parameters, various permutation combination to understand if XYZ was there. A prominent name, perhaps you will get it in a one go. But a lesser known person, you will need to put a lot of permutation and combinations to understand if he was ever in, if there was any adverse media reactions. Why that is necessary? Again, the risk perspective, that there was something which was not, where the law enforcement authorities were not comfortable with, or maybe perhaps there was some legal action that was initiated. So that increases your risk perspective on them. Another thing that you do in your customer due diligence part is to map him with the proposed transactions he's coming in. All of you would be aware that when these days, when you go to open an account, or even when the review of your account, of a current account is done, they normally ask you, what is your annual projected transactions? Why are they asking you? Because they want to understand at the beginning of the year, how much is the potential of transaction? One. Number two, are you really able to have that kind of, do you have that kind of infrastructure? Now, if I go and tell them I'll do $1 billion worth of business every month, so do I have that kind of capability? So that kind of profile matching is done at all centers when they're onboarding a person. That is a part of the customer due diligence. For an individual who is a salaried person, you ask him what is his salary, and based on his salary, you'll ask him, okay, if he's into a financial center, he will ask him for what purpose, how much will you be doing. If he is going for a DNFBP, maybe a real estate person, will have different set of questions to be asked. The jewelry part, another set of questions. So the questions may change, but the purpose is the same, to map his profile with the transaction that is going to be done. Now, the identification of the true beneficial owner. Now, this is where the government has come out with the new circular 58 of 2020, Cabinet Decision 58, which mandates that every company has to keep a list of its owners, beneficial owners, with a shareholding with a 25% or more interest in the company. There may be complex structures, like a company is owned by another company. There are 7 layers of companies, and then ultimately you still find out the person. You need to find out who owns the entity. It cannot be a vague person or a juridical person. It has to be an individual, unless it is a public listed company where there are large number of shareholders, in which case the senior management becomes responsible. So these are the requirements to understand from where the funds are coming. When you have a layer and layer of companies behind companies, you are not able to find the true beneficial owner of the funds, which may actually be a curtain for the money laundering. Your customer due diligence, therefore, is a example or a requirement to find out the complex legal structures in the corporate sector. Now, when you've done the CDD, there are requirements like when there is a hit which has happened, or the risk profile of the customer. When you do a risk profiling, you normally, as per the trend, you need to identify them into 3 buckets: the low risk, medium risk, or a high risk. Now, there are various parameters which are applied to find out whether he's a low risk, medium risk, or a high risk, whether it is a company or an individual. If it is a company, it may be because of his nature of business. A real estate company will always fall into a high risk entity. A person, a salaried government employee, will always come into a low risk profiling, unless there are certain other parameters like his nationality, or maybe his some other, the product that he's going to use. So that may lead to a higher risk. So whenever there is a higher risk, or if there is a political, and he's a political entity, in both the cases, we are mandated to perform an enhanced due diligence. Enhanced due diligence is nothing but an additional on the customer due diligence which we did. But we need to now document the source of funds and the purpose. The source of funds and the purpose with the CDD is completing our ECDD, or the enhanced customer due diligence. The basic concept being that we need to understand from where the money is coming, because he's of a high risk nature, and from where is he going to utilize. So that brings us to the details on due diligence. So this is the synopsis: why, who, and when is it to be done for an ECDD. We normally do it for the UAE non-residents, as I was mentioning earlier, to high value cash transactions. Any suspicious transactions which you identify, it may be a very small amount, but you are not comfortable with the transaction. Your front office has flagged it, or maybe even at your level, you need to understand there is something amiss. You can go in for enhanced due diligence. A politically exposed person needs to be mandated for ECDD. Corporate customers, customers from high-risk countries, dealers in real estate and precious metals. Now we again come back to DNFBPs, which is the main focus today. There are 4 recent circulars issued by Ministry of Economy in the month of February, which reiterates what has been there in the Cabinet Decision 10 of 2019. Basically, there are 4 major things, and which is actually a restatement and an emphasis on what has to be done. Number 1, appoint a compliance officer. Compliance officer, he is responsible to act as the point of contact with the supervisory authority. Now, this is very important. For a DNFBP, there are no regulators. They are only supervisory authorities with who give them the license. Whereas for a financial institution, they are regulated. The license is regulated. So for them, they are regulators. But for all other activities which come under the scope of AML, we have got the supervisory authorities. And they need to communicate with them to and inform them of the compliance officer who has been appointed. A compliance officer has been appointed. They need to have policy and procedures in place to actually implement it. They need to implement measures of CID, CDD, ECDD, so that entire process of having policy, procedures, the due diligence measures, everything should be there. They need to report transactions. Now, reporting transactions is not as was being done earlier. It has now been brought into an automation process known as GoAML, which is basically coming in from the United Nations Office of Financial Intelligence, which is UNODC, which has implemented an automation tool, and Central Bank of UAE or the government of UAE has mandated the FIs and DNFBPs to get registered before 31st of March into this GoAML. We will come into that later. The 4th, and which is very important, is the registration for reporting system, the system of sanction list. We are discussing about sanction list. That is one part. There is another part to the sanctions or the list. That is a local central bank mandated list, or from the Ministry of Economy. They may also come out with a list of blacklisted persons, or maybe they want to understand, so they may put them on the watch list. Those lists are also put into the specific web portal, which is, we have mentioned this portal ID. You need to register on that, UAE IEC, the Import-Export Council. So there, they are the mandated agency to update those lists. That doesn't mean that it will be only one way. They can be taken off the list, they can be reimposed, but there are certain aspects when, if the name comes there, certain subject to conditions, you need to freeze the funds and inform the FIU. So that is one of the work that the compliance officer has to perform. And there is a particular format which has also been circulated, under which the names can be circulated, like you have taken a transaction from those lists, then you need to inform why it has been done, or you need to inform them that this was not there, but you have done, and then subsequently it has come in picture. So there are certain parameters, and the format has been circulated by Ministry of Economy. Now, under this circular 1, 2, and 3, and 4, which is specific for each industry. Now, I just forgot to tell you that under circular 1, it is for real estate brokers. The second circular for the precious metals. The third circular was for the account audit and auditors. The fourth was for the company service providers. The legal part will be covered by the Ministry of Justice. It is not part of the Ministry of Economy, but then the overall emphasis will be the same. Now, one of the aspects that Ministry of Economy has put in the circular is that they will be applying a risk-based approach and conducting on-site, off-site inspections to ensure that the compliance is being done. And therefore, all the companies which are falling under these categories need to implement the AML CFT laws. They have to put in place policies and procedures. They have to understand the risk assessment. They have to do their own enterprise-wide risk assessments. They need to maintain customer records as per the mandate of the government, so that when there is a record, when there is any additional information being sought, you are able to provide that in as quickly as possible. Now that brings us to the reporting part, the GoAML. Now, what is GoAML? GoAML, there was something which Mr. Abhishek spoke of. That was the STR, the suspicious transaction reporting. So any transaction which a compliance officer wants to report, and he can report it earlier, so before, prior to the circular being in place, it was through an email or through a letter with all the documents with the detail. There was one pager which they had to inform. Now that has been converted into an automated digitalized form, and that is known as the GoAML. GoAML is an integrated software solution specifically used by all the FIUs worldwide. So it is a standardization of the reporting format worldwide for all the FIUs. It is available through the GoAML portal of Central Bank, and we'll go into those details as well. It is applicable to FIs, not designated DNFBPs, and they need to be registered for the individual and corporate. Now, what are the stages? The first stage actually is the registration in the protection system of GoAML, that is the SACM, wherein unless you do that, you cannot proceed to the second stage. The second stage is the registration in the GoAML system. Now, before you start going to the registration, you need to have the following documents in hand. Authorization letter from the institution you represent, because there is no approval for a financial institution. A compliance officer is approved by them. He is nominated and they approve him for being appointed. In the case of others, there is no approval. You need to be given an authorization by the board or the owner or whoever is the decision maker that you are nominated as the compliance officer. That letter should be available. Your copy of passport, resident visa, Emirates ID has to be, the copy of the commercial license is required, and which is another very important thing, which is the Google Authenticator, which is an application from Google which keeps on changing the password every minute. Now, what does this SACM mean? That is the Services Access Control Management. So this actually gives an control as to who is going to use the GoAML portal in Central Bank. What we need to do, these are the initial prerequisite information that we need. Identify who your supervisory body is, because there may be different supervisory bodies. So there may be a free zone, there may be a mainland entity in Dubai, there may be a mainland entity in Abu Dhabi. So wherever the head office is, they are the reporting entity, and they need to understand who are there, who is their supervisory body. The legal name as registered, the copy of the trade license, the trade license number, the scanned PDF of the valid Emirates ID, and the letter of representation. These are required. So then you need, secure the secret code by entering these details and uploading it into the SACM process. This is a screenshot of the SACM, which requires you to upload all the required details. And once that is done, you will get a confirmation. We have received your application, your temporary. So once this is done, you need to verify your email ID by clicking on the link that you receive. Only after that you will get the code for proceeding with the GoAML process. The actual process. So there were, as we said, there were two phases. One was to create your code. Second is the registration in the GoAML. And most importantly, the deadline for that expires on 31st of March, 2021. You need to sign up as an organization because you are the reporting authority, and you also need to sign up as an individual because you are the responsible person. You will log in as an individual to access the GoAML portal. So this is how it happens. This is the workflow of registration, the signing up, the registration type, the registration organization. You need to enter the phone and address. You need to enter the detail of the person, his passport details, his attachment, and then the confirmation. I'll show you what exactly happens on the portal itself. So you need to go to the GoAML portal and you will register yourself as an organization first. Once you're done as an organization and the entity IT is received, then you go in and you can nominate other persons as well. But when you're doing it for the corporate, you need to do it for yourself as a corporate entity, and you will nominate your first MLRO. That is what is being done in the initial phase. So here, when you go into that GoAML portal, you will find two tabs. One, register as a new organization or register as a new person. First and foremost, you need to use the register as a new organization. When you do that, you will get the other details of the type, organization, registering attachments, other things. So here is what the type comes up. You have to report only as a reporting entity. You are nothing else but a reporting entity because you are reporting it to the FIU. Once you do that, you need to put in all the details of the person who is being going to use this on behalf of the corporate, his phone number, his addresses. Once that is done, you will generate and you will upload the date, his passport copy, his authorization letter. You will also need to put in the checksum or check details to verify that you're not a robo that is doing it. In case you want to change any of the uploaded documents, that can be done till that time. Once it is submitted, then you will receive a confirmation that your information has been submitted, and you will now get an email whether it is accepted or rejected. And the reference number is very important for any correspondence with the regulator. Now you'll have to wait for the final approval, and once you get that, you get your organizational ID. Now, once the organizational ID is received, now you can register further individuals. If it is a large organization, you may want other people to also be involved. Maybe one person is not enough. In that case, you go into the second tab, which is register as a new person. But for that, you need to put the organization ID, which you received in the first step. Once you put the organization ID, the person is then linked to that corporate ID. The details are the same that we entered earlier. It is the same screens that come up, but then these are additional persons who are getting. And now who is going to approve this? The person who registered first as the MLRO. He has the ability to approve these persons to use. The final approval will come from FIU, but the first stage of approval will come from the MLRO. He will use the user request management menu and use the name below which is there, and then he will either approve. While approving, he needs to also give him the role that he wants to play. There may be different roles he wants to identify. Now, there are predefined roles in the menu. It can be an admin, it can be a user, whatever it is. But you don't want to give him that predefined role. Then there is an option to add new roles. You can add new roles and then apply those roles to him. Once that is done, he is approved for usage from your end. The second phase of approval will be done by the FIU. Now, all these are done for what purpose? Reporting purpose. The Go AML is a reporting requirement. What do we report? We report two different reports. One is an STR and one is an SAR. STR is the suspicious transaction report, which means a transaction has happened in your organization which you feel is a doubtful one. SAR is an attempt. So we call it the suspicious activity report. A transaction has not happened. You have not been put into any trouble, but still you have a feeling that there was something suspicious. You report it to the authorities so that such kind of person doesn't go and do it in somewhere else. They will alert, they will keep a tab in the system that that kind of person is not doing any other transaction anywhere else. So what is the STR or the SAR process is that these are web reports. Okay, we go into the portal, upload it. So the reporting entity ID would be used. The type of report will have to be entered. The MLRO details will be there. The location where it has happened. Now, if you've got 3 or 10 or 100 branches, each branch has to be identified. You have to inform the reasons for reporting. You have to put in the details of the transactions. You have to put in the person details and then submit. So all the details that you were capturing have to go in. Now, these will be available only when your due diligence has been properly done. If the initial part, the due diligence, there was something lagging, at this point of time, you will be stuck. And then your STR would be incomplete and you may get a revert from the authorities that this is incomplete and you need more information. Excuse me. Now, going forward, I just want to give you a brief of some of the cases of money laundering which have been reported. So you get a feel of those kind of transactions which are covered under money laundering. So case study number 1 is related to use of a real estate to launder money. Here, a European was acting under a cover name as the director of a company, for which he opened an account with a Belgian bank. Transfers were made from abroad, including some with the instruction of one of our clients. So there, it is hidden. The source has been hidden for the credits. The funds were used to issue a check to a notary for the purpose of purchase of property. Now, the attention of the notary was drawn to the fact that post the purchase, the company has gone into voluntary liquidation and the person concerned bought the property back from his company for an amount considerably above the original price. So initially the source was missing. It has been brought into the system, and from the system, he has generated an asset, and from the asset, he has again rolled over some of the cash into the system by paying a considerable price above the normal. So the company was just a front for carrying out the property transaction. The second case study is also related to real estate, or rather a restaurant, establishment of a restaurant. So an individual purchased a real estate in order to start a restaurant that he financed by mortgage of Bank A. The mortgage was repaid by transfers from an account opened with Bank B in the name of his spouse. Within 1 year, his spouse's account was credited by cash deposits and debited by cash withdrawals, as well as transfers to Bank A. So there were a lot of entries which were coming in cash and debited in cash, and the repayment was happening from this account where the cash transactions were happening. A question on the source of funds. On the debit side of the account, there were various transfers to a specific country in favor of a natural person, as well as repayment of the mortgage by transfers from an account opened with another bank in the name of his spouse. the fudging of the accounts, the mixing of the funds is happening, and the real nature of transactions are being hidden. The main involved person was known to be a part of a network that illegally smuggled foreign workers to Europe. This was the ultimately when the STR was filed and the investigations happened, that was found out. Now coming to one of the cases in gold. In USA, the Homeland Security investigations uncovered a scheme where illicit proceeds from drug trafficking organizations were used to purchase gold. The criminal organization was buying gold from various precious metal retailers using illicit proceeds. The gold was then sold to precious metal broker, who then sold it to other businesses. So the gold cycle was being maintained, but then the organization that was buying was doing it in cash. And then it was being via the funds that were collected in the company were being wired to a third party out of the country who had links to the drug trafficking organization, thus completing the money laundering cycle. So wherever we come across the money laundering, the three stages are to be looked into: where it is being layered, where it is being infused back. Those are the steps that are done to bring the funds back into the system. The system is misused rather to hide the nature of funds. The fourth case study that we have is a sale of gold uses justification for movement of funds to another jurisdiction. So here a company was operating in country A and frequently sending representatives to country B, offering services to buy gold. So the representative would be visiting country B and offering to purchase gold at a very higher rate than the local market was offering. Obviously, he will get a lot of activity, and a lot of gold was purchased by him. And because of this activity, high quantity of funds were transferred from country A to country B, with the reason given that the funds would be used to purchase gold. The organization held a significant, in fact, they went and held an event in a luxurious hotel in country B, advertising its intention to buy gold. It is said that the money that was spent in that event was also from the other country, with reasoning of holding the surplus that was held, surplus from those kind of activities. This is a pictorial representation of one of the cases where a wholesale gold trade is used to cover ML operations. So this is a wholesaler A, where he has sold the gold to legitimate buyers through a company B, and he has received payment in cash. So no identification as recorded. There is another company which is also buying gold from him, where it is below the threshold, so no reporting is being done. Ultimately, he is generating cash, and that cash is being either deposited into different accounts. So it is moved around in the banking channels, and the entire total transaction is estimated to have been around 800 million via the banks. So with that, I would now request for all the questions to keep coming on the topics that we discussed.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Satish. It's wonderful presentation, and especially the case studies and the theory and the practical aspect of how to register is very, very useful. And when you were making the presentation, we have asked our members and guests to write some question on the chat. So, and I also informed Mr. Abhishek, so we can start taking the questions. So
yes, sir, we can.
So let's start. How is the financial crime and AML industry going to deal with ever-growing false positives?
Yeah. So it's a very relevant question. Actually, if somebody who is a compliance officer, their major time is to clear the false positive, reduce the false positive, and see how they can create an internal whitelist to improve the screening process, thereby enhancing and focusing on the main areas of compliance apart from the screening side. So yes, there are tools which are coming up. In fact, Central Bank of UAE has undertaken a big exercise this year as part of reviewing the sanctions framework for all the financial institutions. And obviously, it will go ahead, all the supervisory body will also do going forward with regards to DNFBPs. And the major focus has been whether the systems and the monitoring system which are there in place are effective enough to identify and how to reduce the false positives. So there are many things, and in fact, I and my colleague Satish always discuss about this aspect, how to reduce it, and we generally work on certain algorithms where not only on the basis of the name screening, but the weightages should also be given on the nationality, date of birth, and other information that is there to arrive at a consolidated risk score to say whether this is true match or it's a false positive. So there are a lot of activities which are going on in this, and obviously the regulators as well as the counterparties and financial institutions are taking important steps. Yeah. Does this answer the question, or do you want to elaborate further?
I think it answered the question. And can you specify some tools which our members can use? Is there any gold standard tools are available to reduce the false positive? Like in case of transfer pricing, we have the database, we have the best practices. Because this AML tool is a global. What I can see, this is the implementation is happening now in the UAE. But in one form or the other, the regulations are in place in other part of the world. Is there any gold standard tools are available where people should learn?
Yeah. So all the standard tools which are there across the world depends on the data set which they are working on. So there are many players who have standard tools. If you talk about global, there is KYC C6, there is which provides the database. There is WorldCheck, which provides the database and has its own internal methodology to identify how to help the compliance officer in reducing false positive. You can set the risk scoring on the back end with regards to how much weightages you give it to the only name, because for example, let's say Mohammed Salman, this name may come up quite a lot of time in terms of the screening when you do screening, and maybe the customer you are dealing is not actually the Mohammed Salman which is there on the list. So for that, the organizations also have to, and they are actually enhancing their system to capture the data. So if you capture the data as well as you have a strong screening backend solution, your false positive is likely to reduce. And that is how going forward would be the case in the financial sector. Satish, if you want to elaborate further.
It's fine, sir. I would say that for the purpose of screening, you cannot have a worldwide solution because there are the requirements changes from country to country. The basics are the same, of course. But here we are also dealing with the requirements. The entities are new to this AML software solutions. So it is better to have an solution which is prepared specifically for the entity. That will help being very focused on getting the correct results. You cannot have a off-the-shelf solution to be implemented, I would say.
So there is no ready-made solution. It has to be.
There are. Of course, there are.
Okay.
But then you need to customize it to ensure that you get a good result that is required to, because what you are saying, the names that we float around here are not the same which would float around in Europe.
Yeah.
Okay, the data sets are the same, of course, yeah. But the whitelisting, the percentages that we fix need to be specified based on case-to-case basis.
Yeah. Before we go, I have a question. Now everybody is reading, everybody is talking. People are in a very different world. So now I take the example of, say, the Bitcoin, more specifically, the NFT has come. We have the BitOasis. The way government is coming out and making more and more exchange friendly of the new finance world. We can say the Ethereum is coming out, the decentralized finance is becoming better. More and more organizations are coming in this form of money. The Elon Musk has said that you can buy Tesla and some other thing. So if somebody has deposited, say, a Bitcoin, I have purchased some Bitcoin and I made a payment through the Bitcoin. So what is the stand in the AML in this scenario? Is it okay, not okay? Because this is the fastest growing asset side in the world. And today we see every day, there is no single day when we don't read the news about the Bitcoins, its financing, this acceptance and other thing. So is it, what is the view? I mean, what is our responsibility in the organization?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll take up this. Thank you so much for asking the question. I think it is very relevant given the information which is floating, especially on the Bitcoin. And obviously, a lot of things are happening in terms of the regulations issuing the virtual, cryptocurrency assets or, launching certain platform. You have named a couple of them, Ethereum or Bitcoin are quite prominently moving forward. But, let us take a step back. And the purpose of Bitcoin when it was launched in the early 2010s or something, if I recall, and I started hearing about it somewhere around 2013, was that it was, created to smoothen the payment processes. Yeah. So there is a company still which works on blockchain, very similar to what Bitcoin does, except that this Ripple, if you would have heard about it, Ripple, helps multiple banks do settlement in a real-time basis. Now, the platform works on blockchain, and blockchain is a concept where it works completely on the consensus of each of the parties who are involved within the framework. So, with regards to Bitcoin, what is the rationale behind it going up or going down? How many, it's anybody's guess, but if you go to India, all the listed entities are not allowed to deal or purchase assets in Bitcoin. If you go to, Canada, there are much more leniency given, and there are ATMs which have been launched. As you mentioned, Tesla in US, you can purchase Tesla through Bitcoin. Now, this is something, what is happening is that it varies from different jurisdictions and different regulators. Now here, with regard to virtual currency and virtual asset, lot of initiative have been taken, and especially commendable initiative have been taken. Regulatory framework has been drafted. So what happens is ultimately these kind of platform may become retail friendly, and when it becomes retail friendly, you have to protect the rights of the consumer rights at the end of the day, and that transparency is very important. So from AML perspective, if you ask me, I being a ACAM certified person, I am very worried about this because of I cannot identify who the ultimate owner of the fund is, and if I am not able to identify the ultimate owner of the fund, it exposes my financial institution, if I'm working as a compliance officer, to potential money laundering risk or terrorist financing risk. So as long as I'm able to establish the flow of money, the source of money, the comfort is there. So it really, a lot of work has to be done in terms of the regulatory requirement, but it varies from different jurisdiction to different jurisdiction. In fact, DMCC also signed MOU with SCA on on the issuance of the virtual currency and virtual assets. So these are some good times to a lot of new regulatory frameworks are there. But obviously, from the compliance side, enhanced due diligence has to be done for such kind of businesses because it is kind of high risk, like a MTO, money transfer operator. Similarly to that, it could be considered as a high risk business.
Just only one small question, like in the digital finance, there is DeFi is gaining ground, decentralized finance. So basically, the technology and what they say, money can exchange. The concept of the AML is you want to know who the ultimate beneficiary is. But in case of blockchain, it is always certain. It is always certain and it cannot be changed. Nobody can change in the world. So is it treated as a cash? It is treated as the asset, or still evolving in this part of the world?
But I'll try to answer it in two parts. First part is, from the AML perspective, the key requirement for us is for any transaction, the source of the fund and the beneficiary of the fund has to be identified. So in Bitcoin, as you rightly mentioned, that it is, on blockchain or similar virtual assets, if are on blockchain, obviously nobody can change the flow of the information which is there. But the challenge which happens is the person, the KYC profile of the person, okay, would be, let's say his name is XYZ, but what his KYC profile is, who verified him that this person has this money or he's representing somebody as a front. So that is where the question comes, that how I am able to verify the person who is putting the money into the financial system. And that is where the worry starts. I'm not saying this is not a good platform. It is a very good platform because it can be utilized to settle the money in a real-time basis. Currently, when we send money, it takes a day or two. And some of the banks, if you see, especially if you send the money to India, there are also real-time transfers also if you are connected through an API. So what Bitcoin does is it becomes like we call it open banking now. A big concept is also going on. So you can open the API and you can connect with all the banks, and a lot of banks have started doing that. So there is a lot of surge which is happening, but that would be my response to first part. I don't know if Mr. Satish wants to add anything. He can.
No, I think so. No, it's fair enough, sir. Please carry on.
Yeah. So there is another question. What would you suggest the professional who want to grow in compliance industry, especially in the MENA region? Is there any certification or the industry you feel will grow in leaps and bounds? Is there an opportunity for our members and the professionals? And how do you guide them?
I think this is something, Mr. Satish would be the best person given his experience and knowledge, what he has gained over the years, 30 years of experience. Yeah, Mr. Satish.
So yeah, there is a lot of opportunities. There is a lot of requirement for AML CFT professionals, and they can take up a lot of the certification. There are professional organizations giving the training, the certificates. In fact, we ourselves assist people to get these certificates from the organizations. And AML CFT is not the end of it. There is a lot of other certifications which should be done along with it. It cannot be a standalone that you are a AML certified person and you think that it is one and all for everything.
There is another question. We are, my close friend, Mr. Unni, we are in projects and distribution business. There was a case of customer coming for cash purchase for re-export purpose. Is there any limit for cash sale? We normally take the Emirates ID copy from the customer's representative. Is it good enough? So what he said that we in the project and distribution business, and customers are coming with in a briefcase with lots of currency, and they are buying goods, and they just take the Emirates ID copy. Is it enough, or they need to do more due diligence?
I think the answer to the question is already there in the question, which I'm saying. See, is there any limit for the cash sale? Is the risk appetite of your organization? And because you deal with financial counterparties, your bankers, if you collect cash, huge amount of cash, which is a deviation from your normal business, and you go and deposit it in the bank account, the bankers will also ask you the question from where you got the cash. Now, when you have to answer to the banker, obviously you need to take certain documentation from your counterparties, in terms of where they are providing you. So generally, we always suggest that cash sale is something which is, if it is unavoidable, please proceed, but at least make sure that how the money has come, whether the person has come from outside the country, so he will have a declaration at the custom from the airport. He can provide you that copy. So at least that documentation can support you with regards to the financial system. With regards to the documentation, it is very important to understand that you mentioned the customer representative. You are taking the Emirates ID of the customer representative. And if you are taking the ID of the customer as a representative, you would not be doing high value transaction one-off time. So you would be dealing with the customers for a long period of time. You would know the customer, you know the customer behavior. If the customer always insists on paying cash and his business is belonging to the cash, you at least have some information before you decide whether it is a suspicious transaction or not. But if you feel that it is suspicious and deviating from their profile, we highly recommend you protect your business, because ultimately it will hit your bank account, and that will face a lot of challenge for you.
So I can see the last question in the chat, and please do write in the chat if you want our speakers to answer your question. Apart from ACMS, ACAMS and ICA certification, is there any more certification, or these two are the gold standard?
So if you talk about AML and AML, obviously ACAMS is one of the best, but there are many certifications which are going around. There is, if you are from India, you would have heard about Indian Institute of Banking and Finance. They provide a lot of certification on that. But yes, ACAMS has been recognized in the region as one of the standards. So a lot of professionals in the compliance prefer to, be certified from that. With regards to ICA certification, it is much more broader. It covers regulatory compliance also, apart from financial crime compliance. So that is also a good certification. But there are other certifications like certified fraud in sanction compliance and sanction, CFCS, which is also gaining a lot of prominence. Then there are certifications like CFE, certified fraud examiner, which also covers, and fraud is one of the perspective of AML. So there are many people proceeding in multiple areas. So this can be considered for somebody apart from ACAMS and ICE certificate.
Okay, there is a supplementary question, which is, we can say in the last, in the earlier question of cash sales, is the company a DNFBP? And if they are in trading business, are they also required to register in GoAML?
The DNFBP is already defined. There are 4 criteria for that.
Yeah.
They have to be in the real estate, they have to be in the precious metal, they have to be accountant auditors, or they could be company service providers.
Correct.
Or the legal professionals. So they, apart from that, they are not considered as DNFBP. The definition of DNFBP is very clear.
Okay, got it. So, as you have seen that there is a high demand of your presentation, because there is so much technical stuff that we have to go through twice. And and there is one more. How should the transactions from a non-resident customer through domestic account be treated? Slightly more technical level 2 question.
So in this question, you are dealing with a non-resident customer. If you can elaborate your business, that would help us to answer the question more better way. If you can elaborate the kind of business you are dealing with.
So I think we will.
You are allowed to deal with non-resident customer as a, I mean, lot of visit visa people come. You're allowed to deal. No, trading firm doesn't need to register. I think there is a question which has come whether the trading firm should register. The answer is no. Trading firm is not falling under the definition of DNFBP as per the Cabinet Resolution number 10, which is the implementation procedure for law number 20.
Okay.
So
there is one thing, is a trading company is it a global standard that trading firms are not registered, or like DNFB is the criteria which is for the registration is applicable unique to the UAE, or is this more or less same elsewhere as well?
More or less same.
More or less same everywhere. So thank you very much. And it's a lot of questions and technical stuff. And with your permission, we will be emailing the presentation to our members. Because a lot of members have asked in the chat box, which you can see. And I will now invite our Secretary General, Mr. Dilip Sinha, to give vote of thanks. Dilip sir.
Yeah, thank you, Naveen-ji. I think it's been a wonderful presentation. Topics have been well covered by both Abhishek ji and Satish ji. It's really well defined, and I, just looking at the number of messages that's coming and asking for the presentation. So for the members, it's been a very useful evening. Well done, Naveen-ji, in bringing this topic so quickly, because 31st March is the last date. So it was very important to bring it in front of our members, at least those who are applicable companies. They can go and register and seek advice and help. So again, thank you all very much for coming, being the panelists, sharing your knowledge, and to all the members and guests who have come here this evening. And to the members, we'll keep on bringing such relevant topics, which helps and gives good advice on relevant areas and subjects that you might desire. So thank you. And well done, CB, in organizing the whole thing. And Naveen-ji, look forward to more from Audit Accounting Advisory Body, more and more such relevant seminars. So thank you
very much. Thank you very much.